There are some mornings that feel too quiet to be real. In the hills above the city, where the fog curls against glass walls and dissolves into nothing, Graham Hale stood at the edge of his living room and watched his son through the reflection of a window. The house was worth $14 million. The silence inside it was priceless in all the wrong ways. Evan sat cross-legged on the floor near the conservatory window, his small fingers tracing patterns against the glass. Outside, a sparrow landed on the stone railing, tilted its head, flapped once, and vanished into the pale morning light. The boy's hands lifted immediately, thumb pressed to his chest, fingers fluttering outward like wings breaking free. Fly. He was signing the word, graceful, instinctive, beautiful. Graham saw it. He almost understood it. But the gap between seeing and knowing, that gap had been widening for years. He turned away, coffee cup cooling in his hand, and stared at the marble counter instead. Easier to look at something expensive than something you failed. The house had 9 bedrooms, heated floors, a wine cellar that cost more than most people's retirement, but it didn't have the one thing Evan needed most: a father who could hear him. Not with ears. Evan could hear just fine. His muteness wasn't medical. It was selective, born from a trauma Graham still didn't fully understand. The doctor said it might lift one day. His ex-wife said it didn't matter, that the boy had found another way to speak. She'd begged Graham to learn it. American Sign Language. ASL. The bridge between them. But Graham Hale was a man who built empires by delegating problems. He hired tutors, speech therapists, occupational specialists. He wrote checks that could have funded entire schools. What he didn't do was sit down and learn the language his son was already fluent in. By the time he tried, stumbling through online videos at midnight, fingers clumsy and ashamed, his wife, Elena, was gone. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences. The truth was simpler. He'd chosen convenience over connection. And Evan had chosen silence over a father who couldn't listen. The memory surfaced now, unbidden and sharp. 3 years ago. The custody hearing. Elena signing rapidly to Evan across the courtroom, while Graham sat rigid in his tailored suit, hands folded, useless. The judge had looked at him with something close to pity. "Mr. Hale, you can't buy back attention. You can't outsource love." Graham had won partial custody anyway. Money does that. But winning and connecting, those were different languages entirely. He glanced back at Evan now. The boy had moved to the window seat, knees pulled up, watching the sky like it held answers. His hands moved again, slower this time, deliberate. Home. Where? Graham's throat tightened. He didn't know if Evan was asking a question or making a statement. 15 miles south, in a part of the city where fog didn't linger because it had nowhere soft to land, Angela Reed woke to the sound of rain drumming against cardboard. She blinked once, twice, then carefully rolled onto her side to check the tarp. Still holding. The underpass above her had decent coverage, one of the better spots she'd claimed in the last 8 months. Dry, relatively safe, close enough to the shelter for breakfast. She sat up slowly, joints stiff from the cold, and reached for her backpack. Inside, a change of socks, a toothbrush, 3 protein bars, a water bottle, and a laminated card she refused to throw away. It was her old teaching credential. Angela M. Reed, paraeducator, special education. The photo was from 6 years ago. She looked younger, happier, still employed. She traced the edge of the card with her thumb, then tucked it back into the bag. No use dwelling. The past was a language she couldn't afford to speak anymore. But some things you don't forget. Before the streets, Angela had been a miracle worker in a 3rd-grade classroom. Not the kind with a degree or a salary that matched her skill. She was support staff, the woman who knelt beside desks, who learned each child's rhythm, who turned frustration into understanding with nothing but patience and presence. Her specialty? Deaf and hard of hearing students. She'd learned ASL in college, kept learning through certifications, through workshops, through late nights practicing with friends who'd grown up deaf. It wasn't a job requirement. It was a calling. And she was good. There was a boy once, Marcus. 7 years old, brilliant, angry at a world that kept talking at him instead of with him. The school wanted to move him to a separate program. Angela refused. She sat with him every day, signing stories, teaching him that his hands could build bridges others were too lazy to cross. By the end of the year, Marcus was reading 2 grades ahead. His mother had cried when she thanked Angela. "You didn't fix him. You saw him." Angela had smiled and signed back. He was never broken. Then her own mother got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. No insurance. Angela became a full-time caregiver overnight, feeding tubes, medication schedules, hospice coordination. She burned through her savings in 4 months, burned through her credit in 6. When her mother finally passed, Angela had $340 to her name and an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. The school couldn't hold her position. "Budget cuts," they said. "We're sorry," they said. She tried to find work. But gaps in employment are loud. And landlords don't rent to people with gaps. So, she learned a new language. The language of survival. Where to sleep without getting moved. Which shelters served dinner. How to spot trouble before it spotted you. How to keep your hands warm enough to still be useful. Because Angela Reed had lost her home, her job, her stability, but she hadn't lost her skill. Every morning at the shelter, she interpreted for a deaf man named Jerome who couldn't navigate the intake forms. Every afternoon, she taught basic signs to a runaway teenager who'd gone mute after escaping his family. No one paid her. No one asked her to. She did it because some things are more important than survival. Some things are about remaining human. Now, she stood under the dripping overpass, pulled on her one clean jacket, and checked the time on a broken watch she wore for the weight of it. Almost 7. The shelter opened at 7:30. She packed her things carefully, methodically. Everything had its place. Chaos was a luxury she couldn't afford. As she slung the bag over her shoulder, a stray dog, some kind of terrier mix, ribs showing, limped out from behind a dumpster. Angela crouched slowly, pulled out half a protein bar, and placed it on the ground. The dog hesitated, sniffed, ate. Angela's hands moved without thinking. Safe. Eat. Tomorrow. The dog couldn't understand ASL, obviously, but but the rhythm of her hands, the gentleness of the motion, that transcended species. The dog wagged its tail once. Angela smiled, a small, tired thing, and stood. "See you tomorrow, buddy." She turned toward the shelter, pulling her hood up against the drizzle. Somewhere across the city, in a house made of glass and money and silence, a boy was staring out a window and wondering what the word home really meant. And neither of them, not the woman who had lost everything, not the child who had everything but connection, knew that in less than 4 hours their worlds would collide. That one would vanish, and the other would be the only person who could find him. The thing about wealth is that it insulates you from consequence. Until it doesn't. Graham Hale learned this at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other. He was in his home office, all reclaimed wood and floor-to-ceiling screens, finalizing the acquisition of a logistics company in Singapore. Numbers scrolled. Lawyers murmured through speakerphone. His assistant, Caroline, knocked twice and entered with his lunch on a tray. "Mr. Hale, just a reminder," Evan's therapist called. "She wanted to confirm your session at 2. Graham didn't look up from the contract. "Reschedule it. This call's running long." "Sir, that's the 3rd time this month." "Caroline." His voice was polite, firm, final. "Reschedule it." She nodded and left. Graham signed the digital document with a flourish, leaned back in his chair, and felt the brief, hollow satisfaction of a man who just added $8 million to his portfolio. He didn't know it yet. But in that exact moment, his son was slipping through the garden gate at the far end of the property. The gate that was supposed to be locked. The gate that the new groundskeeper, hired just 3 days ago, had left ajar while hauling mulch. Evan had been watching that gate for an hour. He sat on the stone bench near the koi pond, pretending to read a book about planets, but his eyes kept drifting to that sliver of open space. Beyond it, the world hummed. Cars. Voices. The city that his father's walls kept at bay. Inside the estate, everything was controlled, scheduled, silent in all the wrong ways. Outside, there was noise, chaos, life. The boy's hands moved slowly, almost unconsciously. Fly. Out. See? He looked back at the house. His father's office window glowed with blue light. The man inside was a shape, a shadow, someone Evan loved but couldn't reach. Not because he couldn't speak, because his father couldn't hear. Evan stood. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something else. Curiosity, the pull of the unknown. He walked toward the gate, stopped, looked back one more time. No one came to the window. He stepped through. The alarm didn't sound immediately. The estate's security system was sophisticated. Motion sensors, cameras, perimeter alerts. But it was calibrated for intruders coming in, not for a 9-year-old slipping out. By the time the sensor on the garden path registered movement and flagged it to the security office, Evan was already 3 blocks away, moving through a neighborhood of tree-lined streets and identical mailboxes. He walked with purpose, the way children do when they're pretending they know where they're going. His backpack, Spider-Man, slightly too big, bounced against his shoulders. Inside, a juice box, a granola bar, his tablet, and a small blue notebook filled with drawings. He wasn't running away. He was exploring. At least, that's what he told himself. At 12:15 p.m., the head of security, a former police sergeant named Vincent Mora, knocked on Graham's office door. "Mr. Hale, we have a situation." Graham looked up, annoyed. "What kind of situation?" "Evan's not on the property." The words took a moment to register. Then everything stopped. The call, the contracts, the carefully constructed world of control and delegation and expensive solutions. All of it. Meaningless. Graham was on his feet before he realized he'd moved. "What do you mean he's not on the property?" "The north garden gate was left open. We've checked the cameras. He exited at 11:52. We're reviewing footage now to track his direction." Graham's face went pale, then red. "You're telling me my son has been gone for 20 minutes, and I'm just now hearing about it?" Mora's jaw tightened. "Sir, the system flagged it as routine movement. We're implementing. I don't want explanations. I want my son." Graham was already moving, phone in hand, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Behind him, on the screen, stock prices continued to rise. None of it mattered. By 12:45 p.m., the machinery of panic was in full motion. Police units dispatched. Helicopter requested. Amber Alert drafted. News vans circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Graham stood in the driveway, surrounded by officers, security personnel, and a crisis management consultant who'd appeared out of nowhere with a tablet and a speech about controlling the narrative. He wasn't listening. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere 3 years ago, in a courtroom, watching Evan sign to his mother while Graham stood useless and silent. The judge's voice echoed now, unbidden. "You can't buy back attention." He'd tried, anyway. Thrown money at the problem. Hired experts. Built walls. And now his son was gone. Detective Maria Ruiz arrived at 1:10 p.m., stepping out of an unmarked sedan with the kind of weariness that comes from seeing too many of these cases end badly. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, skeptical by training and temperament. She listened to Graham's frantic explanation, took notes, asked the questions no parent wants to hear. "Does Evan have a phone?" "No. I didn't think he needed one yet." "Any places he likes to go?" "Friends' houses." Graham hesitated. He doesn't really have friends outside of school." Ruiz's pen paused. "What about communication? If someone found him, how would he tell them his name? His address?" Graham's throat tightened. He doesn't speak. He uses sign language." "ASL?" "Yes." Ruiz nodded slowly, filing that away. "And you're fluent?" The silence that followed was answer enough. She didn't judge him. Didn't need to. The truth was already loud enough. "We'll find him, Mr. Hale. Kids this age don't get far. And with the media attention you're generating, someone will spot him." But her voice carried the weight of someone who'd made that promise before and broken it. 15 miles south, Angela Reed sat in the common area of St. Vincent's shelter, half watching the mounted television while sorting through a bin of donated clothing. The news was on. Always the same loop. Politics, traffic, a celebrity scandal. Then the screen changed. Breaking. Billionaire son. Missing. Search underway. Angela glanced up, only half interested. Until the photo appeared. A boy. 9 years old. Dark hair, wide eyes, wearing a blue hoodie. The anchor's voice was urgent, practiced. Evan Hale was last seen leaving his family's estate this morning. Authorities are asking anyone with information to call. The footage cut to B-roll, police cars, helicopters, an aerial shot of the estate. Then, a brief clip. Security camera footage from a nearby intersection. The boy walking alone, backpack bouncing. He stopped at a crosswalk, looked both ways, and then his hands moved. Just for a second. A small gesture, almost absent-minded, but Angela's entire body went still. She leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. The boy's hands had formed a word. Home. Then another. Where? He wasn't panicking. Wasn't crying. He was asking. Angela stood abruptly, the clothing bin forgotten. Around her, other shelter residents barely noticed. The TV was always on. The news was always bad. This was just another tragedy in a city full of them. But Angela moved toward the screen like it was magnetic. The footage looped. The boy's hands moved again. Home. Where? He's signing, she whispered. No one heard her. The anchor continued. Authorities believe he may be disoriented. The child is nonverbal and may not respond to verbal communication. Angela's mind was already racing. Nonverbal. ASL. Lost. And no one looking for him would know how to ask him where he was trying to go. She grabbed her jacket. Where you going? Angie. Jerome, the deaf man she'd been helping all week, signed from across the room. She signed back rapidly. Boy, lost, signing. I have to help. Jerome frowned. Police? Yes, police. She was out the door before he could respond. The 14th precinct was 8 blocks away. Angela walked fast, hands shoved in her pockets, mind turning over the footage she'd seen. The boy hadn't looked scared. He'd looked searching. Like he knew what he was looking for, but not how to find it. She pushed through the precinct doors at 1:35 p.m., slightly out of breath, and approached the front desk. The officer behind the plexiglass, young, tired, annoyed by the interruption, barely looked up. Help you? I'm here about the missing boy, Evan Hale. That got his attention. He looked up, took in her worn jacket, her chapped hands, the faint smell of street that clung to anyone living outside. His expression shifted. Not hostile, just dismissive. You have information? I saw the footage on the news. He was signing. ASL. I think I can help. The officer's face softened slightly. The look you give someone who means well, but doesn't understand how these things work. Ma'am, we appreciate the offer, but the family's hired private security, and we've got a full task force on this. If you saw something specific, he signed home and where? He's not panicking. He's looking for something. Right. We'll pass that along. He was already turning away, reaching for the phone. Angela's hands tightened into fists. I'm a paraeducator. I worked with deaf and nonverbal students for 6 years. If someone finds him and doesn't know ASL, he won't be able to tell them. Ma'am. The officer's voice was firmer now. Professional. Final. We've got interpreters on standby. We've got the best people on this. I promise you, we're doing everything we can. The unspoken part hung in the air. We don't need help from someone like you. Angela stood there for a long moment, jaw tight, heart pounding with frustration she couldn't afford to show. Then she nodded once. Right. Of course. She turned and walked out. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, harsh and indifferent. Angela stood on the precinct steps, hands shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of knowing something that no one would listen to. She pulled out her phone. Not a smartphone. A cheap prepaid flip phone with 17 minutes left on it. She stared at it. Then she made a decision. If they wouldn't listen, she'd find the boy herself. There are two kinds of searching in this world. The kind that makes noise, helicopters, sirens, commands barked through radios. And the kind that listens. Graham Hale knew only one of those languages. By 2:00 p.m., the estate had transformed into a command center. The living room, all marble and minimalist furniture, was now crowded with bodies. Police liaisons, FBI consultants, a child psychologist explaining behavioral patterns, news producers requesting statements, the crisis manager hovering at Graham's elbow with talking points. Graham stood at the center of it all, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating a private security team to supplement the police search. I want every camera within a 5-mile radius reviewed. Every business, every traffic light, every doorbell. I don't care what it costs. On the screens behind him, maps glowed with search grids. Red dots marked last known positions. Blue zones indicated areas already cleared. It looked organized, comprehensive, professional. It looked like control. But Detective Ruiz, watching from the doorway, saw something else. She saw a man trying to buy his way out of powerlessness. And she'd seen enough of these cases to know you can't purchase what matters most. Graham ended the call and immediately started another. Ruiz approached carefully. Mr. Hale, we need to talk about your son's patterns, his interests, places he might... I've already given that information to your team. I'm asking you directly. Graham stopped, looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. What do you want me to say? That I don't know my son well enough to answer that question? The honesty surprised her. He likes space, planets. He has books about astronomy, and he draws constantly. Buildings, bridges, patterns. Graham's voice cracked slightly. He's brilliant. He sees the world differently than I do, and I never took the time to learn his language. Ruiz pulled out her notepad. When you say patterns, geometric, symmetrical. He'd spend hours arranging his toys in specific formations. His therapist said it was a coping mechanism. Structure when everything else felt chaotic. Ruiz wrote that down. So he'd be drawn to landmarks, architectural features, things with visual rhythm. Graham nodded slowly, seeing where she was going. The old railway bridge. There's a pedestrian tunnel underneath, Art Deco tile work, repeating arches. We drove past it once and he pressed his hands against the window, made me slow down so he could look longer. Where is it? About 4 miles northeast, near the industrial district. Ruiz was already on her radio, relaying coordinates. Graham watched her work, feeling simultaneously grateful and useless. Detective, when you find him, he won't answer you. Not verbally. We have officers trained in basic ASL. Basic won't be enough. Graham's voice was quiet, ashamed. He uses it fluently. complex sentences, abstract concepts. If he's scared, he'll shut down completely unless someone can actually communicate with him. Ruiz met his eyes. Then you better hope someone who speaks his language finds him first. The weight of that statement settled between them. Someone who speaks his language. Not someone who knows a few signs. Someone who understands. 4 miles northeast, Angela Reed stood outside a corner store, studying a hand-drawn map on the back of a receipt. She'd spent the last hour retracing the route from the news footage, asking questions at bus stops and bodegas, piecing together sightings. A woman at the bus stop remembered a boy in a blue hoodie, walking with purpose, heading toward the old industrial area. A delivery driver mentioned seeing a kid near the railway overpass, sitting on a concrete barrier, watching the trains. Angela connected the dots. The footage had shown the boy signing home and where, not panic, but purpose. He was looking for something specific, something that felt like home. And if she understood anything about kids who communicated through patterns and visual language, he'd be drawn to structure, repetition, safety. The railway tunnel fit. Art Deco arches, symmetrical tile work, a place where the chaos of the city became geometry. She folded the receipt and started walking. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a chain-link fence covered in ivy. Not exactly secure, but enough to keep casual foot traffic out. A rusted sign read, "Authorized personnel only." Angela ducked through a gap in the fence, careful not to snag her jacket. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. The tunnel stretched ahead, lit by scattered graffiti and shafts of light from grates above. The walls were exactly as she'd imagined. Gorgeous, decaying Art Deco tiles arranged in repeating wave patterns. It was beautiful in a forgotten way, and perfect for a boy who spoke in patterns. She moved quietly, eyes adjusting to the dimness. "Evan?" she called softly. Her voice echoed and died. She tried again, this time using her hands even though no one could see. "Safe, friend." She paused, listened, somewhere deeper in the tunnel. A scraping sound. Angela moved toward it, stepping carefully over broken glass and discarded needles. The sound came again, something metallic dragging across tile. She rounded a corner and stopped. There. 30 feet ahead, partially hidden behind a support column, sat a small figure in a blue hoodie. Evan. He was crouched on the ground, using a piece of chalk to draw on the tunnel floor. Even from this distance, Angela could see it, intricate geometric patterns spiraling outward in perfect symmetry. He was building order in the chaos, creating home in the only way he knew how. Angela's throat tightened. She knew this behavior. She'd seen it 100 times in classrooms. Kids who couldn't control their environment, trying to create structure anywhere they could. She approached slowly, making sure her footsteps were audible. Not sneaking, not threatening. When she was 15 feet away, Evan looked up. His eyes were wide, cautious, but not afraid. Angela stopped. Lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the ground, making herself smaller, less imposing. Then she raised her hands where he could see them. "Hello." Evan stared at her. She continued, slow and clear. "My name, Angela." The boy's hands twitched. He was processing, evaluating. "You sign?" Angela asked. A pause. Then Evan's hands moved, tentative. "Yes." Angela smiled, a real smile, warm and steady. Me too. You safe? I friend. Evan's shoulders relaxed slightly, but he didn't move closer. Home? He signed. Where home? And there it was. The question he'd been asking since he left. Angela chose her words carefully. Your dad looking. Worried. Love you. Evan's face flickered with something complicated. Guilt, confusion, longing. He not understand me. Angela's heart broke a little. I know. He try. He learn. Need help. You help? Yes. They sat like that for a long moment, two people speaking a language the world outside had forgotten existed. Angela pulled a protein bar from her bag, held it up in question. Evan nodded. She slid it across the ground rather than approaching, letting him control the space. He unwrapped it carefully, ate slowly. Scared? Angela asked. Evan shook his head, then reconsidered. Little bit. Brave. Angela signed. Very brave. The boy almost smiled. Angela glanced toward the tunnel entrance. She could hear sirens now. Distant, but getting closer. The police would find this place eventually. Graham's resources would flood every corner of the city. But right now, in this moment, it was just her and a boy who needed someone to understand. Your dad love you. She signed again. Want talk. Want learn your words. Promise? Angela hesitated. She couldn't promise what Graham would or wouldn't do. But she could promise this. I help. Make sure he listen. Evan studied her face, reading something deeper than words. Then he nodded. Okay. Just as Angela stood to help him up, the tunnel exploded with sound. Flashlights. Boots. Voices barking commands. Police! Hands where we can see them! Evan's face went white. He covered his ears, curling into himself, the pattern on the floor forgotten. Angela spun toward the officers, hands raised, but her focus was on Evan. He's deaf to your noise, she shouted. You're scaring him. 3 officers rushed forward, one reaching for Evan. The boy panicked, scrambling backward, hitting the wall. Angela stepped between them. Stop! She signed and shouted simultaneously. Look at him. Detective Ruiz appeared behind the officers, slightly out of breath. Her eyes took in the scene. The woman, the boy, the chalk drawing on the floor. Stand down, she ordered her team. The officers hesitated, then lowered their weapons slightly. Ruiz approached Angela carefully. You the one who called from the precinct? I tried. No one listened. Ruiz looked at Evan, cowering against the wall, hands still over his ears. Then back at Angela, who was signing something slowly, repeatedly. Safe. Breathe. Look me. Gradually, Evan's eyes focused on her hands. Safe. She signed again. These people help. Take you, Dad. You come? Angela glanced at Ruiz, uncertain. The detective nodded once. Yeah, she comes. They walked out of the tunnel together, Angela in front with Evan, the officers behind, Ruiz on the radio updating Graham. Evan held Angela's hand, his other hand occasionally lifting to sign simple things. Sky. Bird. Home soon? Yes. Angela signed back each time. Home soon. As they emerged into daylight, news cameras were already setting up across the street. Police barricades held back the crowd. And there, behind the tape, stood Graham Hale. His face transformed when he saw Evan. Relief, anguish, desperate love, all colliding at once. He ran forward, dropping to his knees. "Evan." The boy stopped, looked at his father, and signed, rapid and emotional. "Dad. Scared. Sorry. Love you. Find home." Graham's hands lifted, trembling, trying to remember the signs. He managed 3. Love you safe. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it was enough. Evan wrapped his arms around his father's neck and held on. Angela stood back, watching, feeling the strange hollowness that comes when your purpose is suddenly complete. Ruiz approached her quietly. That was good work. He just needed someone who could listen. Most of the city was looking for him. You're the one who found him. Angela shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I just know the language. Ruiz studied her for a moment, taking in the worn jacket, the backpack, the signs of someone living rough. Where are you staying? St. Vincent's. When there's room. Ruiz pulled out a card, scribbled something on the back. My personal cell. If you need anything. Seriously. Angela took it, surprised. Thank you. Graham approached them, Evan still clinging to him. His eyes were red, grateful, overwhelmed. You found my son. Angela nodded. He found himself. I just knew how to ask him where he was going. I need to thank you. Properly. You don't need to do anything. Angela's voice was gentle, but firm. Just learn his language. Really learn it. He's been speaking this whole time. You just weren't listening. The words hit Graham like a physical blow, because they were true. Evan pulled back from his father and signed to Angela. Thank you, friend. Angela signed back. Always friend. You brave. You strong. Then she stepped back, ready to disappear into the crowd before the cameras turned her way. But Detective Ruiz caught her arm. Hold on. This isn't over yet. Angela frowned. He's safe. That's what matters. That's not what I mean. Ruiz gestured toward the gathering media, the police brass arriving, the mayor's car pulling up. You're about to become a very public person, whether you want to be or not. Angela's stomach dropped, because she understood what that meant. The woman who saved the billionaire's son, the homeless hero, the story the city would consume and then forget. She'd spent months trying to be invisible. Now, that was about to become impossible. Fame is a strange kind of violence. It doesn't announce itself, doesn't ask permission. It simply takes your face, your story, your humanity, and turns it into something consumable. Angela Reed learned this within 3 hours. By 6 p.m., her image was everywhere. Grainy security footage from the precinct, her entering, trying to help, being dismissed. A bystander's cell phone video from outside the tunnel, her walking out hand in hand with Evan, signing to him, keeping him calm. And then the headlines. Homeless woman saves billionaire's son. Ignored by police, she found him anyway. The hero they turned away. Angela sat in an unused interview room at the precinct, staring at Detective Ruiz's phone, watching herself become a symbol. You can say no, Ruiz said quietly. To all of it, the interviews, the press conference. You don't owe anyone your story. Angela set the phone down. Will saying no make it stop? No. But it might make it more bearable. Through the door's narrow window, Angela could see the chaos. Reporters arguing with desk sergeants, camera crews setting up in the parking lot, producers making calls. And somewhere in that machinery of attention, Graham Hale was giving a statement. Angela could just barely hear his voice through the walls. Owe her everything. My son is alive because one person took the time to see him, to understand him. While I was deploying helicopters and security teams, she was doing what I should have done years ago, learning his language. His voice cracked. I failed my son in every way that mattered, and a woman who has nothing gave him everything. 20 minutes later, Graham knocked on the interview room door. He looked different than he had that morning, smaller somehow, stripped of the armor that wealth provides. "May I come in?" Angela nodded. He sat across from her, hands folded on the table. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Graham said, "I don't know how to thank you. You already did, outside. That wasn't enough. Words aren't—" He stopped himself, almost laughed. Words. That's the problem, isn't it? I've spent my whole life believing that words, the right contracts, the right speeches, could solve anything. But my son doesn't speak in words, and I was too arrogant to learn. Angela studied him. She'd seen his type before, men who led with money because they didn't know how to lead with presence. But there was something different now, something cracked open. "It's not too late," she said. "I don't know where to start." You start by sitting with him, not fixing him, not hiring people to fix him, just being there. Learning one sign at a time, making mistakes, trying again. Graham's throat worked. "Will you help me?" "Mr. Hale." "Graham. Graham, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a specialist. I'm someone who's been sleeping under an overpass for 8 months. You're someone my son trusted when he wouldn't trust anyone else, including me." He leaned forward. "You have a skill that saved his life. A skill you clearly love. And from what Detective Ruiz told me, you've been using it to help people even when you had nothing." Angela didn't respond. "I'm not asking you to be his teacher. I'm asking you to help me be his father." Graham pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. "That's my personal attorney. She's setting up a consultation fund, resources for families learning ASL, training for first responders, scholarships for para-educators." Angela picked up the card. "That's generous. It's necessary and overdue." He paused. "There's also an apartment, furnished, paid for a year. It's not charity. It's payment for what you did, for what you know, for what you can teach me." Angela set the card down. "I don't want to be a story. The homeless woman saved by the rich man. I've seen how those stories end." "Then we don't make it that story." Graham's voice was steady. "We make it about a community learning to listen, about a city finally understanding that not everyone speaks the same language, and about a father who's trying to learn how to talk to his son." Angela looked at him, really looked. She saw exhaustion, shame, but also something real, hope. "One condition," she said. "Anything. Evan's voice matters most. Not mine, not yours. His. Whatever we do, We do it because it helps him, not because it makes us look good. Graham extended his hand. Deal. Angela shook it and felt the weight of her life shift into something she didn't yet recognize. The press conference happened at 7:30 p.m. The precinct's community room had been transformed into a media circus. Every local station, 3 national networks, reporters from outlets Angela had never heard of. Graham stood at the podium, Evan beside him. Detective Ruiz to the left. The mayor, smelling opportunity, had positioned himself prominently in frame. And Angela, at Graham's insistence, stood slightly behind them all, visible but not centered. She'd refused makeup, refused coaching. She wore the same jacket she'd worn that morning, the same worn jeans. She was exactly who she was. Graham spoke first. His statement was brief, humble, and surprisingly raw. My son is safe tonight because of Angela Reed. She saw what I missed. She heard what I couldn't. And she did it not for reward or recognition, but because she understood something fundamental that I'm only now learning. He paused, looked at Evan, then back at the cameras. That communication isn't about speaking loudly. It's about listening carefully. Evan has been speaking his entire life. I just wasn't using the right language to hear him. He stepped back. Evan lifted his hands, signing something slow and deliberate. Graham translated, his voice thick. He says, "My friend Angela helped me find home. Now I want to help other kids like me find theirs." The room erupted in camera flashes. Questions started immediately, a dozen voices overlapping. "Ms. Reed, how did you know where to look? What's next for you? Are you still living at the shelter? Will you be working for Mr. Hale?" Detective Ruiz stepped forward, holding up a hand. "Ms. Reed will make a brief statement. Then we're done." All eyes turned to Angela. She approached the microphone slowly, feeling exposed and uncomfortable. But she thought about Evan, about Jerome at the shelter, about Marcus, the boy she taught years ago, about every kid who'd ever been dismissed because they didn't communicate the way the world expected. And she spoke. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just listened in a language that not enough people know. There are thousands of people in this city, deaf, nonverbal, hard of hearing, who have something to say, who are brilliant and kind and capable. But they're invisible because we haven't bothered to learn how to see them." She glanced at Graham, then Evan. "This isn't a story about me saving someone. It's about a community deciding to learn, to adapt, to stop expecting everyone to speak the same way." She paused, her voice softening. Evan didn't need saving. He needed understanding. And if we're being honest, so do a lot of us. The room was silent for a beat. Then someone started clapping. It spread, reporters, officers, even the mayor. Angela stepped back from the microphone, feeling strange and unmoored. Evan turned to her, signing, "Thank you. Brave." She signed back, "You more brave." Outside, after the cameras had been packed away and the reporters had scattered to file their stories, Angela stood in the parking lot with Detective Ruiz and Graham. Evan was asleep in the back of Graham's car, exhausted by the day. "The apartment is ready whenever you are," Graham said. "No pressure. No strings. It's yours." Angela looked at the card he'd given her earlier. An address in a decent neighborhood. a key code. It felt surreal. 12 hours ago, she'd been under an overpass. Now she had keys to a home. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Time. Patience. Help learning how to communicate with my son. I'll pay you as a consultant, fair rate, professional contract. This isn't charity. It's a job, one you're uniquely qualified for." Angela nodded slowly. "And when the media moves on, when this stops being a story, then we keep working. Because Evan will still need me to understand him, and I'll still need help learning how." It was the right answer. "Okay," Angela said. "I'll try." Graham's relief was visible. "Thank you." He moved toward his car, then stopped. "Angela, you said you worked in education before. Special ed. 6 years. What happened?" She could have lied, could have softened it, but she was tired of hiding. "My mother got cancer. I became her caregiver. Lost my job, my apartment, my savings. By the time she passed, I had nothing left except the skills no one wanted to pay for anymore." Graham was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "It's the way the world works. People fall through cracks. I'm just lucky I landed somewhere soft." "You didn't land. You climbed. There's a difference." He got in his car and drove away, Evan's sleeping form visible in the back seat. Angela stood there alone, Detective Ruiz having said goodnight and headed home. The precinct parking lot was empty now. Quiet. She pulled out the card with the apartment address, pulled out the key code, and for the first time in 8 months, she had a place to go that had a door, and a lock, and heat. She walked slowly toward the bus stop, then stopped, turned back, looked at the precinct building where, just hours ago, she'd been dismissed and ignored, and she felt something strange. Not anger, not vindication, just tired hope. The kind that knows the fight isn't over, but believes it might be worth fighting anyway. She turned toward her new address and started walking. Behind her, the city hummed and shifted, full of voices speaking languages most people would never learn to hear. But tonight, at least, one more person was listening. And tomorrow, she'd teach another. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a renovated building in a neighborhood Angela had only ever passed through on her way to somewhere else. She stood outside the door at 9:47 p.m., key code memorized, but fingers hesitating over the keypad. Behind her, the hallway was clean. Carpet that didn't smell like mildew. Overhead lights that actually worked. Through a nearby door, she could hear a television, laughter, the ordinary sounds of people living ordinary lives. She'd forgotten what ordinary sounded like. Angela entered the code. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open. The apartment was small, a studio, maybe 400 square feet, but it was clean and furnished with simple, functional pieces. A bed with actual sheets, a kitchenette with a working stove, a bathroom with a door that closed, and a shower with water pressure. Angela set her backpack down carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter the illusion. She walked to the window, looked out at the street below. People walking dogs, a couple holding hands, a city that kept moving whether you were part of it or not. For 8 months, she'd been outside that movement, adjacent to it, watching through glass and distance. Now she was inside again, and it felt Strange. Not wrong. Just unfamiliar. Like a language she'd once spoken fluently, but had forgotten the grammar of. She sat on the edge of the bed. Springs creaked. The mattress gave in ways that cardboard and concrete never did. And then, finally, alone and safe, Angela Reed let herself cry. Not from sadness, from the sheer, overwhelming relief of having survived. She woke at 6 a.m., disoriented. The ceiling was wrong. The light was wrong. Then she remembered. Home. She had a home. Angela lay there for a moment, staring at that ceiling, and thought about all the mornings she'd woken to rain, to cold, to the sound of traffic 3 feet from her head. Then she got up, showered in water that stayed hot, and made instant coffee with a microwave that worked. Small miracles. Ordinary ones. By 7:30 a.m., her phone, the cheap prepaid one, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Evan wants to see you. When you're ready, no rush. Angela stared at the message. She could have said no. Could have taken a day, a week, to adjust to having walls and heat and privacy. But she thought about Evan signing friend with his small, earnest hands. She texted back, I'm ready. Where? The Hale estate looked different in daylight. Less like a fortress. More like what it was. A beautiful, lonely place that money had built, but love hadn't filled. Graham met her at the gate personally. No security escort. No staff hovering. Thank you for coming. How is he? Clingy. Quiet. He slept in my room last night. First time since he was 4. Graham's voice carried equal parts exhaustion and wonder. He keeps signing questions I don't understand. I've been trying to look them up, but... Show me. Graham lifted his hands awkwardly, trying to recreate the movements. His fingers fumbled, spacing wrong, motion unclear. Angela watched, then gently corrected his hand shape. He's asking if you're coming back, if you're safe, if you have food. Graham's face crumpled slightly. He was worried about you. He understands what it means to feel invisible. He was making sure you could see me. They walked toward the house in silence. Evan was in the conservatory, the same spot where he'd watched the bird fly that morning, a lifetime ago, though it had only been one day. When he saw Angela, his face lit up. He ran to her, signing rapidly. You okay? You eat? You have home? Angela knelt to his level, signing back with a smile. I okay. I eat. I have home now. Thank you for worry. Dad learning, Evan signed, glancing at Graham with something between hope and skepticism. Slow, but try. Trying important, Angela signed. Learning take time. Evan nodded solemnly. Then after a pause, you teach him? Angela looked up at Graham, who watched the exchange with desperate attentiveness, catching maybe one word in 5. Yes, Angela signed to Evan. I teach. You help? The boy's eyes widened. Me help? You best teacher. You know what Dad need learn. Evan considered this, then nodded, suddenly serious, a child given a mission he understood. He walked to his father, tugged his sleeve, and began signing slowly, deliberately. Dad, watch, learn. Graham looked to Angela for translation. He says he's going to teach you. Start with the basics. He's taken this very seriously. Graham's voice was thick. Okay, I'm ready. For the next hour, Angela sat on the floor of the conservatory and watched a boy teach his father how to say "I love you" with his hands. Graham was clumsy. He mixed up similar signs. His fingers didn't move with the fluidity that native signers had. But he didn't give up. And Evan, patient, focused, forgiving, corrected him gently each time. Again, the boy would sign. Try again. And Graham would try again. By mid-morning, the media storm had reached new intensity. Angela Reed was trending nationally. Opinion pieces flooded editorial pages. The mayor announced a new initiative for ASL training in city services. Corporate sponsors were offering donations to deaf education programs. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Graham's phone rang constantly. Producers, journalists, advocacy groups. He ignored all of it. At 11 a.m., his attorney, a sharp woman named Victoria Chen, arrived with contracts and legal documents. The consultation fund is established. $2 million in seed money. Angela has signature authority on disbursements. We've set up a non-profit structure, so it's transparent and tax efficient. Graham barely looked at the papers. Whatever she needs. Just make sure she has access. Victoria turned to Angela. There's also the matter of your employment contract. Graham wants you as a family consultant, 20 hours a week minimum, flexible schedule, full benefits. The salary we're proposing is... She slid a paper across the table. Angela looked at the number and went very still. It was more than she'd made in a year as a paraeducator. That's too much. It's market rate for a bilingual specialist with your experience, Victoria said. And honestly, it's less than you're worth. I don't even have a current address history. I can't pass a background check. You passed the only background check that matters, Graham interrupted. You saved my son. Everything else is paperwork. Angela stared at the contract. 6 months ago, she'd been sorting donated clothes at a shelter. Now she was being offered a salary, benefits, and the resources to help people the way she'd always wanted to. It felt surreal, unearned. I didn't do this for money, she said quietly. I know, Graham replied. That's exactly why you deserve it. The press conference announcing the fund happened at 2 p.m., this time at a community center in the neighborhood where Angela had been staying. Graham insisted on holding it there, not at his estate, not at some corporate venue, but in the community that had housed Angela when no one else would. The room was packed. Local residents, shelter staff, ASL advocates, deaf community leaders. And Jerome, the deaf man Angela had been helping at St. Vincent's, sat in the front row, signing to her from across the room. Proud, you change world. Angela signed back, feeling her throat tighten. We change together. Graham took the podium first. 24 hours ago, I thought money could solve any problem. I learned yesterday that some problems can't be bought. They have to be listened to. He gestured to Angela. Ms. Reed will be leading a citywide initiative to train first responders, city employees, and community members in ASL basics. We're partnering with local deaf advocacy groups to ensure this is done right, not as charity, but as justice. As recognition that communication is a right, not a privilege. The deaf community members in attendance signed applause, hands waving in the air, the visual language of approval. Graham continued. We're also establishing scholarships for paraeducators and interpreters. Because people like Angela, people with skills that save lives, should never have to choose between helping others and keeping a roof over their heads. He stepped back. Angela approached the microphone, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. She spoke and signed simultaneously. This isn't about one woman being rescued. It's about a community deciding that everyone's voice matters, that different languages don't make people less human, just less heard. She paused, looking at Jerome, at the shelter staff who'd given her meals and dignity, at the faces of people who understood what it meant to be invisible. I'm not special. I just happened to know something that mattered at the exact moment it mattered. But there are thousands of people in this city with knowledge and skills and stories that could save lives, if anyone bothered to ask. Her voice strengthened. So this fund isn't just about ASL training. It's about listening, really listening, to the people we walk past, the people we dismiss, the people we assume have nothing to teach us. She looked directly at the cameras. Everyone has a language. We just have to learn how to hear it. After the press conference, after the handshakes and the promises and the photographs, Angela found herself alone with Graham and Evan in a quiet corner of the community center. Evan was drawing again, always drawing, his small hands creating patterns on a piece of paper. Graham watched him, then said to Angela, "I've been thinking about what you said, about the cracks people fall through. Yeah? My company, we could do more. Hiring practices that don't discriminate based on communication style, partnerships with deaf-owned businesses, training programs." He looked at her. "But I don't want to do it performatively. I want to do it right. And I don't know how." Angela considered this. Start by hiring deaf consultants. Actually pay them. Listen when they tell you what doesn't work. And be willing to be wrong. Will you help with that too? That's not my expertise. But you know who to ask, and you know how to listen. Graham's voice was earnest. I'm not asking you to fix my company. I'm asking you to teach me how to stop being the problem. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said. Angela nodded slowly. Okay, but Evan comes first. Always. Always, Graham agreed. Evan looked up from his drawing, sensing the conversation, even though he couldn't hear it. He signed to Angela. You stay? She signed back. I stay. Promise. The boy smiled, a real smile, unguarded and bright. Then he held up his drawing. It was the tunnel, the Art Deco arches, the geometric patterns he'd made on the floor. But in the center, he'd drawn two figures. Him and Angela, and above them, in careful letters, home. 3 months later, the city looked the same. But if you knew where to look, if you knew what to listen for, you could hear the difference. Angela stood in the lobby of the Eastside Community Center, formerly the abandoned railway station near the tunnel where she'd found Evan, and watched workers install the final piece of signage. Quiet Haven Center, a space for every voice. Below it, in both English and ASL gloss, communication access, resource hub, community learning. The renovation had taken 12 weeks. Graham's fund had covered the structural work. Community donations had filled it with furniture, books, equipment. Deaf artists had created murals on the walls, hands forming words, faces, and conversation, the visual poetry of signed language. It was beautiful. Jerome approached her, signing with his characteristic expressiveness. Remember this place? Cold, empty, now look. Angela signed back. You helped build your home too. He grinned. Our home. The center would officially open tomorrow. But today was for the people who'd made it possible. The shelter residents who'd volunteered, the deaf community members who'd consulted, the local businesses who'd donated, the people the city usually forgot. Today, they were being remembered. In a corner of the main room, Evan sat with 3 other children, 2 deaf, 1 selectively mute like him, teaching them a game that involved arranging colored blocks in patterns and then signing the pattern names. Spiral, wave, bridge. The children's hands moved with concentration and joy. Graham stood nearby, not hovering, just present. His ASL had improved dramatically. He wasn't fluent yet, probably never would be, not truly. But he could have real conversations with his son now. Simple ones, but real. Angela watched him sign to Evan. Proud, you good teacher. Evan beamed and signed back. Learn from best. He pointed at Angela. Graham caught her eye across the room and mouthed, Thank you. She nodded. Some gratitudes didn't need translation. Detective Ruiz arrived at 4 p.m., out of uniform, carrying a bakery box. Couldn't miss the preview, she said, setting the box on the snack table. Besides, I wanted to tell you something. What's that? The department's making ASL basics mandatory for all new recruits and offering incentive pay for officers who become fluent. Ruiz's smile was wry. Took a 9-year-old going missing for us to figure out what should have been obvious. Better late than never. Is it though? Ruiz's expression sobered. How many people did we fail before this? How many times did someone need help and we couldn't understand them? Angela didn't have an answer for that. The truth was too heavy to carry all at once. You're doing it now, Angela said finally. That counts. You're generous. I'm practical. Can't change the past. Only the present. Ruiz studied her. You're different than 3 months ago. More settled. Angela considered that. I have a door that locks. Heat. A bed. Turns out those things make a difference. It's more than that. You carry yourself different. Like you remember who you were before. Maybe I'm just becoming who I was supposed to be all along. By 5 p.m., the preview event was in full swing. Someone had set up a sound system playing music with heavy bass, the kind deaf attendees could feel through the floor. Kids ran between rooms. Adults clustered in conversation groups, some signing, some speaking, many doing both. A local news crew was filming, but keeping a respectful distance this time, letting the community speak for itself rather than making it a spectacle. Angela had given exactly 1 interview in the past 3 months. She'd learned quickly that attention was a currency she didn't want to spend. The work mattered. The spotlight didn't. She stood near the window, watching the street outside, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. Ms. Reed. Angela turned. A young woman, early 20s, black, wearing a Howard University sweatshirt, stood there nervously. I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to say thank you. For what? I saw your press conference. The one where you talked about paraeducators and how we're underpaid and undervalued. The woman's voice strengthened. I was about to quit my program. I'm studying to be a special education teacher, and I couldn't afford to keep going. But after your speech, 3 different scholarship funds reached out. I'm fully funded now. I can finish. Angela's throat tightened. What's your name? Zara. Zara Williams. Zara, you would have found a way regardless. People like us always do. Maybe. But I would have been alone. Now I know there's a community. People who see this work as valuable. Zara signed as she spoke, fluid, natural. I'm specializing in deaf education. Because of you. Because of yourself, Angela corrected gently. I just held up a mirror. Zara smiled, signed thank you with both hands, and melted back into the crowd. At 6 p.m., as the sun started its descent, Angela found Evan on the roof terrace, a small outdoor space that had been converted into a garden. He was standing at the railing, watching the city lights begin to flicker on, his hands absently forming signs against the darkening sky. Angela approached quietly, letting her footsteps announce her. Evan turned, signed, pretty, lights, like stars. Yes, Angela agreed. Beautiful. They stood together in comfortable silence. Then Evan signed something slower, more careful. Before. I feel invisible. Now. I feel seen. Angela knelt beside him. You always visible. Always important. World just not looking right way. You teach world look different. We teach together. Evan smiled, then signed. Dad better now. Still learning, but better. Proud of him? The boy considered this seriously, then nodded. Yes, proud. He try hard. You forgive him? Another pause. Then, forgiving. Process. Take time. Angela was struck by the wisdom in that. From a 9-year-old who understood that healing wasn't an event, it was a language you learned slowly, over time, with patience and mistakes and trying again. You very wise, she signed. Evan ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. Graham appeared in the doorway to the terrace. He didn't interrupt, just waited until Evan noticed him. The boy ran over, and together, father and son signed a short conversation. Clumsy on Graham's part, graceful on Evan's, but understanding flowing between them nonetheless. Then they both turned to Angela. Graham spoke aloud while Evan signed. We want to show you something. They led her downstairs to a small room on the 2nd floor, formerly a storage closet, now converted into something else. Graham opened the door. Inside was an office, modest but complete. Desk, computer, bookshelves, a wall of windows overlooking the street. A nameplate on the desk read, Angela Reed, Director of Community Programs. Angela stared. The board approved it yesterday, Graham said. The center needs someone to run the day-to-day operations. Someone who understands the mission. Someone the community trusts. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person in the city. His voice was firm. You've lived it. You know what it means to be invisible, to be dismissed, to survive anyway. That's not something you can learn from a degree. Evan tugged her sleeve, signing, Please, we need you. I need you. Angela looked at the office, at the nameplate, at the view of the neighborhood, where, just months ago, She'd been sleeping under cardboard. "What about my consulting work with you?" she asked Graham. "That continues. This is separate. The center is independent. You'd report to the board, not to me. Your own budget. Your own decisions." He paused. "I'm funding it, but I'm not controlling it. There's a difference." It was the right answer. Angela walked into the office, touched the desk, looked out the window. She could see the old underpass from here. The place where she'd slept. The place where she'd helped Jerome fill out forms. The place where she'd remained human when the world tried to make her invisible. Now it was a community center, and she was being asked to lead it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Yes, I'll do it." Evan threw his arms around her waist. Graham extended his hand, then reconsidered and signed instead. "Thank you. Honor work with you." It was grammatically imperfect, but the meaning was clear. The official opening ceremony happened the next morning at 10 a.m. The mayor was there. City council members. Local press. Community leaders. And hundreds of residents, people from the shelter, families with deaf children, teachers, advocates, the curious and the committed. Angela stood at the podium, feeling the weight of visibility again, but carrying it differently now. 3 months ago, I was homeless. I had skills no one wanted to pay for. Knowledge the world had decided didn't matter. I was invisible, but I wasn't powerless. She paused, looking out at the crowd. This center isn't named Quiet Haven because deaf people are quiet. It's named that because sometimes the world needs to stop shouting long enough to listen. To notice the languages being spoken all around us. The stories being told in ways we haven't learned to hear. She signed as she spoke, her hands fluid and certain. Everyone who walks through these doors will be seen, will be heard, will be valued, not because we fixed them or saved them, but because they were always valuable. We just finally learned how to recognize it. Applause rippled through the crowd, both audible and visual, hands clapping and waving. Evan stood next to Graham in the front row, both of them signing "Thank you" over and over. Angela stepped back from the podium and pulled the ribbon on the front door. Quiet Haven Center. The doors opened. People flooded in, exploring, touching the walls, reading the multilingual signs, testing the visual alert systems, gathering in the common spaces. It was chaos. Beautiful chaos. The chaos of community. Later that afternoon, when the crowds had thinned and the official events had ended, Angela found herself alone in her new office. She sat at the desk, pulled out her old laminated teaching credential, the one she'd carried in her backpack through months of sleeping rough, and propped it against the computer monitor. Angela M. Reed, Paraeducator, Special Education. That woman was still here, still present, just evolved. She pulled out a piece of paper and began making lists. Programs to develop, partnerships to build, people to call. A knock on the doorframe. Jerome stood there, signing. "Busy?" "Never too busy for you," she signed back. "Come in." He settled into the chair across from her, looked around the office, then signed with a mischievous grin. "From streets to office. Upgrade." Angela laughed, the kind of laugh that carries release and joy and a bit of disbelief. "Still same person," she signed. "Yes," Jerome agreed. "But now world see what I always see. Person who help, who listen, who make difference. We make difference, Angela corrected. Together. He nodded. Then signed something more serious. Proud call you friend. Angela's eyes stung. Proud call you family. That evening, Angela stood on the corner outside the center, watching the last light fade from the sky. She could see her apartment from here, just 3 blocks away, the window with the light she now left on because she could, because electricity wasn't a luxury anymore. She could see the shelter where she'd spent so many nights. She could see the underpass where she'd met Jerome, where she'd kept her humanity intact through sheer determination. And she could see the tunnel entrance where she'd found Evan. All of it was visible from here. Her past, her present, her future. They weren't separate. They were layers of the same story. She pulled out her phone, a real smartphone now, part of her employment package, and opened her messages. There was one from Graham. Evan says good night. He wants to know if you'll come for dinner Sunday. He's learning to make his grandma's cornbread recipe. Says you have to teach him the sign for delicious. Angela smiled and typed back, tell him I'll be there. And the sign is easy. I'll show him. She pocketed the phone and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, her mother was watching. Angela liked to think so anyway. I'm okay, Mama, she whispered. I'm more than okay. I'm home. She turned toward her apartment. Behind her, the Quiet Haven Center's lights glowed warm against the evening. Inside, someone had left a window open. Music drifted out, bass-heavy, rhythmic, the kind you could feel as much as hear. And if you looked closely, if you paid attention, you could see shapes moving inside. Hands forming words. People communicating. Communities being built, one conversation at a time. Angela walked toward her apartment, her stride steady and sure. Tomorrow, she'd return to the center. There was work to do. Always work to do. But tonight she would sleep in a bed that was hers, in a room with a door that locked, in a home she'd earned not by luck, but by refusing to let the world make her small. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The space smelled like the lavender candles she'd bought last week, like coffee and clean laundry and the particular scent of safety. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. And then, alone in her home, Angela lifted her hands and signed one word toward the lights. Home. The word hung in the air, graceful and complete. Not a question anymore. An answer.